Ask the Podcast Coach for October 27th, 2018.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that fun-filled music. That means it's Saturday. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. We got the band back together. I'm Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, and he's back, the one, the only, fresh off his interview on Chris Curran's podcast engineering school, the one and only Jim Cullison. How's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Good to be back. It feels like a month. Oh, wait a minute. It's been a month.
Been a month, yeah.
4 weeks. Special thanks to Chris and John and Emily for filling in for me. And Australia took a fill in for me. So yeah. Good to be back. It does feel like it's been a long time. So when you do this every week, it gets kind of routine, right? But yeah, like super excited. This morning, I woke up, I'm like, bing, Ask the Podcast Coach. Like,
I was excited last night when I was listening to you on Chris Curran's show. And I was like, oh yeah, Jim's back tomorrow. I was actually getting excited on Friday night about Ask the Podcast Coach, which is fun because it's one of those things when you don't realize how much you enjoy it. And I know you said every now and then it's good to take a break. And it was kind of cool to take a break and go to Australia. That's always fun.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this more. You mentioned Chris Curran and podcast engineering school. Man, that guy's crazy. Like
He's crazy.
I was not quite ready. I probably should have listened to a few episodes going into that one before. I didn't. I kind of went cold. He's crazy.
You seemed a little deer in the headlights at times when you're like, I'm supposed to do what? Scream, sound great? What?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I wasn't ready. And it's okay. I do that on purpose. Like I don't want to go in too predictable, but I probably should have listened on that one.
And the other thing that I like about Chris, and I know he's had people say that he does this too. Chris laughs a lot. Like he makes himself laugh every time he plays a clip or whatever. And to me, I find that, I guess, endearing or whatever. The fact that he giggles and
his
that whole
picture did not match his personality. So I looked up the site. I looked at a few things and I looked at his picture. And then when we started talking, and even he started pretty low key when we were first talking, and then he gets into the podcast. And I was like, whoa, wow, okay. Like energy. I'm in on this. Okay. I think
not everybody starts their show with a grunt, but Chris does.
Yeah. No, it was super great. It was a great experience. It was a ton of fun. I appreciate Chris having me on. It was good stuff. 107, I think, is the episode number out there. Not sure if I'm very helpful, but Chris is funny. So if you head out there and give it a listen.
Yeah, we are at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. If you happen to be listening on the Googles or Mixler, and you can also jump right into the video, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And I've been trying to figure out if I should say this publicly, and which is always a good sign that something else. What's one of the things that let's see, how can I say? When you get home, you don't realize what you miss when you go away someplace. And I'm just going to put it this way. There's something about your own bathroom that there's some sort of like home court advantage to that like when you get back and the toilet paper's rolling the right way and everything fits the way it's supposed to fit. You're like, yes, that was fun. And
it's nice to be home. Let's just say that. I mean, traveling is great, but it is good to be home and kind of in control of your own environment. And
well, you know where you're at. You don't have to. I don't have to use a GPS to get anywhere. I can get a Snickers bar anywhere I want. That was the thing that was weird. You just forget about it. Yeah. You're at the airport and you go to like your typical airport little newsstand, book stand, water and candy store. And you go and you look at the candy, you're like, what? There's no Pop-Tarts? There's no what? It's just
Tim Tams. You can get Tim Tams down there. You should be eating all the Tim Tams that you can. That's the whenever the Aussies come to Gallup, they're always bringing Tim Tams. And so that I always, in the summer, I get boxes of Tim Tams that I enjoy. They're a delicious cookie. And so it's their brand of it.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it online, what I'm holding up is a picture of me holding a somewhat baby koala bear. And I just did it. Kids, all Americans need to learn this because we sound really stupid when we say this. A koala is not a bear. It's a marsupial. And Australians are like, when they do that, they're like, American. It's like if an Aussie comes to the States and gets in a taxi, they're going to get in the front seat. That is where Americans go, it's an Aussie. When we say koala bear, it just stamps the word American on our forehead.
Just own it, though. Like when you go to foreign countries, just
Right.
own it. Yeah, it is what it is. It's like, it's so funny when people mispronounce names or whatever because they have an accent or whatever, and people kind of giggle at that. And you're like, look, I'm not going to make fun of you if you mispronounce my name. I'm just happy that you're saying it.
Well, so here's kinds of things. Just embrace it. To bring it back to kind of a podcast thing, knowing your audience is key. So I had a slide. I was talking about, the top 10 mistakes that podcasters make. And one of them is not getting to the point, right? We're talking about French toast recipes. We're talking about whatever. And I said, can you imagine going to Walmart? Well, I asked somebody before the presentation, I said, you guys do have Walmart, right? And they're like, no. And I go, oh, do you have anything with a greeter? They're like, Target. I'm like, excellent. Okay. But the way this particular event was called We Are Podcast, I had to send them my slides like weeks in advance. So changing my slide, not an option. I'm like, oh, okay. So I thought that was funny because I was like, the whole point was, could you imagine how annoying it was if you went to a Walmart and you had to, like in my case, I had to get travel shampoo and a couple other things for traveling. And if I went in, they're like, hi, welcome to Walmart. And I, great. Can you tell me where the shampoo is? Yeah, just a second. First, I have to tell you about my French toast recipe and what the cat did and they just don't let you in. And so I thought that was hilarious because I'm like going, yeah, you guys, luckily any behemoth kind of thing from America. So they are familiar with Walmart. There's one guy there, Jason, he does the Communicator podcast. And he's actually an American. He's now an Australian citizen because of a female, of course. You go to Australia, you fall in love, and then you never go home. And he laughed because somebody was asking me about Cleveland, and I said, well, back in the 70s, our river caught on fire. And they're like, it did what? And I said, we had a really stupid thing called Nickel Beer Night where we basically ended up with a riot in a baseball game. And he laughed. He goes, you do realize they don't know what a nickel is. I'm like, that's right. Yeah. And then later I said, yeah, exactly. And then I said something later. I said, and then I called an audible and he just starts laughing. And I'm like, what? And he goes, there's no audibles in soccer. And I'm like, oh, that's right. Okay. So all these phrases that you don't realize, and then even it worked the other way. Somebody was talking and they went to mention a sport and they're like, oh crap, you don't know what that is. All right, next go. You skip on. So it was always kind of fun.
I get to do a podcast in Australia and another one in India. And so I talk to them once a month and I think that's getting smaller. That problem is getting smaller and smaller with globalization. I think there are more of those sayings. You don't have to necessarily explain them. Like American football is widely it's very popular around the world in just about every country. And yes, in Australia, they play soccer or football or whatever they call it. But it is, I think we're seeing less and less of that because I've had some folks where I've made a statement like that. And I said, I think for a second and I'm like, oh, do I need to explain that? And they're like, they look at me like, come on, I'm not an idiot. So I think it's getting less. I think that part is getting less and less with so much more media around the world, so much YouTube and such an influence on that. I watched some Australian YouTube videos and they're doing things and they're saying, they're using language that's culturally relevant in that spot. Right. And I don't get pissed because I don't quite understand it.
Right. It's like,
I wonder what that means. Yeah. So I don't know. That whole thing of being, like you got to be sensitive to it. And yes, sort of. But I think the other end needs to understand as well. You are an American, right? Or you are Australian and you're going to say those kinds of things. So I go a little crazy a little bit on the other side. It's like, hey, if you're hearing that and you don't quite understand it, just ask. Like, just say, I don't understand that reference.
Well, like if they said, I'll just make something up. Let's say Australian Thanksgiving was in July, right? And I'm listening to a podcast from Australia, and they're like, "Yeah, blah 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 Thanksgiving," and I'd be like, "Wait, what? It's not November." And I'm like, "Oh, that's right. That's you're allowed to have your own culture. We all don't have to agree on
No, right
everything."
on. And you get mad because they
Right.
said, it's Thanksgiving. There's a whole when Microsoft they named one of their updates the fall, like I think it was called the Fall Creators
Oh
Update.
yeah,
And everybody in the southern hemisphere was like, "Well, it's not fall here," and you go
it's
like, "Well,
autumn.
it is here."
Yeah,
Or it's autumn, right?
yeah.
Right in the UK, it's autumn. It's like, people, like, do we have to be so
Lighten up.
homogenized
Yeah.
in everything we do? We gripe and complain that the world is getting too plain as it is. That we're all it's and that the idea of localization, we're losing that, and yet when people do get local, we come down hard on them, and so I think it's kind of
It's gonna be one or the other.
a little hypocrisy, right? And I think podcasting has the best chance to kind of keep that localization going because it can be about what's local and what's the host and what's the guest and those kinds of things. So I go a little sideways on folks that get all bent out of shape because an Australian said a word that offended American, or an American said a word that offended somebody in Europe. We call it fall, you call it autumn. So what? We know what we're talking about. Let's be smarter than that.
Yeah, I think if it was a case where there was so much unique, for lack of a better phrase, jargon that the other person didn't know what we were talking about, that would be a problem. But that's not the case.
Not generally. And
Yeah,
if it is, raise your hand and ask. Like,
exactly.
hey, I didn't get that. Like, we don't have Walmarts here. Oh, okay. So what could it be like? A Target? Okay, Target. Boom. It's done. Like
That's
people
that's going.
offended over that.
Steve Martin used to have a joke. He's like, how he went to France, and he goes, "Those people they don't even have the I forget how you put it, but like they don't even have the decency to learn English." It's like how rude,
Yeah.
It's like it
Well,
doesn't work.
I think in podcasting we have the chance to really kind of maintain those local customs and yet still educate people on what they are. And we don't have to
Yeah.
lose them. We don't all have to become the same. I'm afraid. I've watched over the last 10 years the culture in India becomes super Western, and I mean super Western. And
Yeah.
a lot of the great things about India are being lost as they try to mimic more and more of the Western culture. And in some ways, it's sad. Like I go, we're losing rich heritage and history and customs and we're trading them for what the West does.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, like McDonald's and you just kind of so I kind of prefer that we don't homogenize things and that we try to hold to or keep at least as much of the local culture as we can. Even though if you live in the Midwest and you have no culture.
Our culture is we have no culture. Yeah. Craig in the chat room says, did I get to see the surfing kangaroos? I did not. I did get to pet a kangaroo. That was quite fun. And the other thing that was the one night we rented two houses. So what it was a 2-day event, and then we had 3 days where we had two houses. We rented two houses where the speakers just went off for like a retreat. And so we're on the back porch of this, all like 12 of us on the back porch. And first a cockatoo went flying by, and these things make horrendous noises when they fly. And then my favorite was this huge bat, like huge, goes flying across the sky, and we're like, okay, what was that? And they're like, oh, it's I think they call it a flying fox or something like that. And Jordan Harbinger goes, that was a cat with wings.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's wild. And then Daniel says sometimes you can turn something that's different into a joke against your country, which is what I did. My second slide is all my credentials. Okay, I've been podcasting since 2005, blah blah blah. And I said, hey, shocking, the American's going to stand up and talk about himself because that's kind of a thing. Like outside of the U.S., especially in I think it's like Asia or something like that. Like actually, like stating the facts. These are my credentials. It's kind of like, ooh, we don't really pump ourselves up like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a very American thing. So I was like, hey, let's draw to the fact that the American's going to do the American thing. And I had a few people chuckle at that.
The Australians are always making fun of us for being boastful and prideful. Those are two words I hear a lot, and you kind of get beaten down a little bit in those countries if you try to do those kinds of things. And so, there's different. Hey, newsflash, there's differences.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is I think we need to embrace them better and understand them, but that they don't need to change either way. Like Americans don't need to become a lot like the rest of the world, much like the rest of the world doesn't need to become like the Americans. There's some pretty amazing things and some pretty great things about the American culture. I think sometimes that gets because everybody loves the underdog. Nobody loves the winner. I think sometimes the American culture gets hammered a little bit. And there are some great things about, be in Germany and try and get food on a Sunday after 6 p.m. Like, sorry, there's nothing open. It's all closed.
That's it.
And you think, oh, how quaint until you're hungry.
That's it. Exactly.
Quaint. Like you're like, what is going on here? And so, there's just some, I get when we do culture bashing that way, I think that we lose what's best about all of those. So we just need to emphasize, hey, what's great about the culture and kind of just celebrate that.
Craig in the chat room says, I found Australians to be so friendly and approachable. Here's the weird thing. I have that one shirt that says, ask me about my podcast. And on the back it says schoolofpodcasting.com. I wear that. If I'm going to go someplace super public, I will try to wear some sort of School of Podcasting shirt. Today I'm wearing my kangaroo shirt from the whatever this place is, the Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary. We call them zoos in America. But anyway, and I had 3 people ask me about my podcast. I never get that in America. And then it was funny. I stopped at this one place to get some ice cream. And I could tell the Australian guy, he kept asking me questions because he just wanted to hear my accent because he just had this giant grin on his face. And that's the other fun thing. One of the guys in the house, his name was Carl. But if you're in Australia, his name is Carl. Like as in like, and I said, well, how do you, and I had to figure out how to say it. Go, how do you phone Carl? Because we then started just calling him Carl. Hey, Carl, like super duper heavy R. And in that case, you would call. I'm going to call him. Call. And we're like, so it was just, we were having the whole last night. It was fun. We had all the Aussies doing American accent and we were doing Australian accents. We're just having a great time with that.
It's
so
fun to watch them try to do an American accent.
Oh yeah.
The
boardwalk.
Yeah.
Stephanie, it was Stephanie Tyler, I think is her last name. She's kind of a social media person. And it was so fun watching her like try to get her mouth right to go boardwalk. So it's hilarious. And it's kind of like learning social media from Mary Poppins.
Yes.
In that, I mean, number one, she's just lovely, but just very proper and very somewhat reserved and to a certain extent, but a really great person.
And a great accent, right? We had Heather Well from Sunshine and Power Cuts on our podcast a while back, and she's from New Zealand. And listen, she could read the phone book to me, and I would just I would just be locked in on it, and it's great. Like, but so those are the great things I think to celebrate, right? When we have these differences, I would hate a world where we were all the same.
Well, meanwhile, in the podcasting world,
we should probably talk about podcasting.
We had a lot of stuff going on with the podcast charts. James Cridlin, who I actually got to meet in Australia, which is great. That guy's super cool. He actually I took video of him. He does his podcast on a phone. Like he literally records it on his phone and somehow, whatever Dropboxes it or whatever and does it that way.
Just using the recording feature on his phone.
Okay. I was there and I watched him record his episode. I actually have video of it because I'm like, I walked by and I heard him go, from the hallway, We Are Podcast 2018 or whatever he said. And I'm like, he's doing the show. I'm like, quick, videotape it. And I was like, that's it. And he's like, yeah, that's he goes, I got to do it wherever I am. And he goes, I got a microphone right here, pointing at his phone. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. But he was talking about the charts. And here's my question. Are charts because I know there's Podchaser. I was playing a little bit with Podchaser, and it's this whole thing again where people can rate and review. And I think there's Chartable. Are charts healthy? Are they? Do we need charts?
I think we do need some things to strive for. Like I think, and there are certain personalities that do better than that with others, and so I think we do need things to strive for and to shoot for. I was listening to the most recent episode of Spreaker Live Show.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Oh my God! I just heard that.
Oh my God is right.
We got to switch Alex to decaf. That's all there's to it.
I love he like takes it up a notch. You can hear the gears shifting in his.
I just want to go up to Alex and go, "Hey, Alex," and he'll go, "What?" And I go, "Google," and just watch his head explode.
He's so great when he gets in a rhythm. It is so awesome to listen to. And he kind of goes off about the podcasting. I think iHeartRadio announced these new award. And
the first ever podcast awards. That was the one that was like, oh,
that's it. Like, do marketing departments actually do research? That's what I'm kind of wondering. Because like you can't make a mistake. You could say that maybe 7 or 8 years ago, but you can't say that today, right? So good job, iHeartRadio, for just offending every single podcaster. But Alex's point is, I think, that he makes on Spreaker Live Show. The point he makes is that all the same shows win all the time, right? It's just the same thing over and over. By the way, this is what happens in Hollywood, right? This is what happens. These things, that's pretty consistent. So is that good? I don't know, Dave. I'm
glad you brought that up, because he was going on, and I'm like, well, they win because they're good.
They are good.
Yeah, that was I'm like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and some of them are not great, and I'm like, so that's why, I don't know, insert podcast name here, is not winning awards. Now, granted, there are times when you think it's a little unfair because Joe Rogan had a career before he started a podcast, and
by the way, not his fault that he had.
Yeah, exactly. And that Serial was launched from This American Life, but I'm like, you still have to kind of, I was talking with someone yesterday who's listening to Serial season 3, which is interesting because I would love to know the person that gave the green light to that, to go, hey, just let them hang out in the courts of Cleveland for a year, because it's not making Cleveland look really good right now. And she just explained, she goes, look, as a person of color, she goes, I was so mad when I listened to, she goes, you have to listen to episode 6. She goes, it made me mad for the whole day. And I was like, well, that's, in a way, I was thinking that's good. Not that I was happy that she was mad, but I'm like, that's kind of the whole point of this whole podcast, is to go, this is messed up, And so, so it's good. So I understand, because I do laugh when I go to anything new, like, hey, look, it's a new place to find podcasts. And it's like This American Life, Joe Rogan, Serial, The Daily. It's all the same, 99% Invisible. Who am I missing? I think that's all the biggies, right?
Radio Lab,
of course. And you're like, really, do these?
They've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it excellently forever. Like, I mean, they really spend some time and effort and money, and that stuff doesn't happen by accident. It's not like it's gifted to them. When they started, especially with Radio Lab, I followed them for a long time. And you can actually hear them getting better through the years too. If you go, sometimes they go back and play their old stuff, and you're like, "Oh, yikes!"
Yeah,
like, wow, where did that come from? And they've gotten better. They've gotten some breaks, they've gotten some money, they've got some people behind them. Here's how it changed me though this week. So I was thinking about this charts idea. I'm glad you kind of brought it up. So I've been wondering, we've been saying a lot, get to the point. You just said it at the beginning of the podcast, get to the point. Like, stop. In my podcast, it takes me about 4 minutes on Home Gadget Geeks to get to the point, right? So last week I rewrote the whole intro, and I was like, okay, my goal, 30 seconds. How do I get from the time it starts to 30 seconds? And so on Sunday or Monday, I rewrote the intro. And then I started practicing it in my car as I was going to work, and it just didn't feel right. Like, it didn't sit well with me. It wasn't me. It was me trying to be somebody else. It was me trying to fit a mold. I was talking with Mike Murphy about it on Monday. We got together and we're just chatting. And he goes, dude, that's your shtick. That is you. Just be you. Don't apologize for it. If it takes you 4 minutes, and if that's going to be a problem, then know that. Like, know it's going to be a problem. And you may lose some listeners over it. But if it makes you happy, if it's what you want to do, if you're most comfortable in it, do it. So, It was a reminder. So by the way, I went back and found a version of the found a version of the intro that before I had rewritten it and restored it. This week I did my regular intro. One of the problems I was doing in it is the music was too loud. And so I asked my audience last week on Facebook. I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about changing up my intro. What do you guys think?" And they gave me some helpful advice, but overwhelmingly it was like, "Hey, there's a sentence in there we can't even hear because the music's too loud." And I'm like, "Okay, you're right. No, you're right. I'm lazy with the music." And I just played it because I didn't figure anybody was even listening to that part anyways. But obviously you are, right? And so there was, for me, so to bring this full circle to your original question, do we need charts? I think we need things to strive for, right? Because I wanted the intro to my podcast to be better because I thought it was stopping people from listening. In that, I asked my audience gave me feedback, and this week caused real change. Now, did I completely change my intro? No. Did I change the music? Yes. And I listened to it about 8 times, Dave, to make sure you could hear that sentence. I think that makes us better.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's the cynic in me that anytime somebody comes up with a new chart or voting system, I just go, okay, well, this will be fun to see how long it takes till somebody learns how to game this thing.
Mhm.
Because it's just, unfortunately, when I'm with you, I think they're handy if we all played nice, if we all follow the rules and we all just let nature take its course. But there are those people that have to be at the top, and they think if I can just get to the top, money from heaven will come.
Yeah.
And so they do things that are not always.
But let them. Like, okay.
Yeah,
like,
and that's it. So I'm
go.
like, wherever I am I remember for a while I could say I was a top 20 weight loss show on Stitcher, because for whatever reason the Logical Weight Loss podcast was doing really good over there, and then real people with real backgrounds in fitness came in and knocked me out. I still do the exact same show. I could kind of care less, but I just saw that, and I was, like I said, I was playing with Podchaser, which is supposed to be they want to be the IMDb of podcasting. I think that's the one, and then it might be Chartable. That's the one, I think. So take this with about a 30% chance of accuracy. There's one of them wants you to give them your Libsyn, your Simplecast, your whatever login name and password so they can go get your stats. And I'm like, that sounds like a really bad idea. And I talked to the guy, and he said, no, it's we're secure as your bank. And I'm like, and banks are getting hacked every day. And I'm like, I'm just not. So it would be nice. I know James Cridland has talked about it'd be nice if there was some system that we could all, politely, let's do this, and we'll all be kind of a way to track everybody. Because he was saying that PodTrack is saying they have 70% of the top 200 shows in Apple Podcasts. And I'm like, that's still not the top industry. Now, granted, I could say, well, I think, no, I don't think I'm using PodTrack at all. I used to use PodTrack stats many, many moons ago, but I could say, well, you're not getting my stats. Yeah, guess what? I'm not going to be competing with Joe Rogan and, NPR and all the, so I just think that's interesting. I just wish they would reword that, because when they say, here are the podcast industry charts, I'm like, no, not really. They should say the podcast top 200. Here's 7. I don't know what they should say, but that's always rubbed me the wrong way that they've
there's no good way to do it though, Dave. I mean, it no matter how you excuse me, no matter how you set these up, no matter how you put them together, Alex's point on Spreaker Live Show was that it's always the same people all the time, right? Well, okay, so let's say you take the top 200 podcasts out, and then you start looking at the bottom. You start looking at everybody else. How are you going to how do you determine that? Like, is it just solely based on numbers? And
Right.
I don't know. I don't want to take away some of those top podcasts are really good. They're at the top for a reason.
That's
and
what
you just hate to take that away. And so yeah, I don't know. I think they need to be there. If we had nothing, and by the way, human nature will never allow them not to be there. There will always be comparing. That's what's made us great as a species, right?
Right.
We're good at that because we can because of competition.
Yeah.
But it should make you better if that's what if that's what you are using them for. It should make you better. Don't get bitter, get better.
Ooh, that's a good bumper sticker
wow,
right
that
there.
actually kind of
Write that
preaches.
down. I think that might be the name of the episode, my friend. Don't get bitter.
Don't get better, get better.
Bitter, better. Okay, cool. That almost sounds like a slogan for like a food. You know what I mean? Like, what's
like,
really bitter? You know, don't.
Well, just make your stuff better. Like if you have an amazing podcast, I think like Dan, what's a Dan Carlin, right? In Hardcore History, that dude does no advertising. He has very little behind him. And yet he gets such incredible word of mouth promotion that like it's amazing because he has an amazing product. Like what he does is amazing, and it takes a ton of time. I think about Home Gadget Geeks, and I spend literally about 2 hours on it a week. And if I wanted it to be better, I should probably spend a little more time on it. You know, it's maybe some editing, maybe some promotion, right? Some of those. So I think in some cases we just need to be better.
Yeah. Speaking of award shows, last night was the Latin Podcast Awards. Felix says in the chat room, 20 winners from Independence Radio and TV podcasts, and the competition was won by all. So there you go. So there's another one. I know there's Australian Podcast Awards. So there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So.
And they are what they are, right?
Exactly.
We watched Todd try to do these things and try to do them fair and try to be independent. And then you just get run over. I mean, we watched that guy just get run over by a bus and then backed up and then run over and then backed up and then run over. So no good deed goes unpunished in that case.
That was me when I heard iHeart was getting into this. I'm like, oh, good. They can get the death threats.
Totally.
Because Todd got death threats, man. I was like, seriously? Over a podcast award? I'm like,
guys, take a chill. You know,
Yeah.
but it's important for people.
Yeah. So, hey, you know what else is important?
Our awesome subscribers.
Our awesome subscribers, he said, grabbing his...
or your awesome subscribers, I should say.
And if I can remember how to share my screen, there we go. So also you can be an awesome supporter by going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And that would include people like Josh from onthebubblepodcast.com, Greg over at debtshepherd.com, where he teaches financial wellness, Jonathan Bloom over at weeklyawesome.com, where you can be great today. It's weekly inspiration. The one and only Glenn the Geek Hebert over at the Horse Radio Network. If you are into horses, that is the guy you want to talk to. Josh Rivers over at podcastingexperiments.com. Max Tresscot from Aviation News Talk. Find it at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane from Spybrary, super nice guy. I've gotten to kind of know Shane behind the scenes. Really cool guy. I finally have the website address and everything. Karrie Bond over at the Key West Perspective, a podcast about island life and the people who live it. You can find it at keywestperspective.com/podcast. Ronsley, the one and only guy that just did We Are Podcast 2018. He runs Amplify Media Group. You can find it at mustamplify.com. And again, if you would like to be an awesome supporter, simply go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And thank you to all of our awesome supporters. And we'll be naming them all next week because, hey, October is toast. It's amazing that it is gone already. One of the things that, since we're talking about getting better, and I'm going to be interested, I guess I'm just a cynic at heart. I try not to be, but there is a new Facebook group that I just heard about in another Facebook group. And it's called, the name of it is simply Podcasters 25th, as in 25th, crit, which I'm assuming is short for critics or whatever. The idea is you go over there and they say on Milestone Podcast. So like not 24th, not 32nd, but it's a Facebook group. And the idea is you're supposed to listen to somebody's show and actually give them feedback. So since we're talking about getting better, not bitter, you might want to check out that Facebook if you're actually looking for feedback on your show. to me, I see that like I see charts. I'm like, okay, that's going to be a matter of seconds before that just becomes a giant spam fest. Because I forget there was another Facebook group, no, another LinkedIn group. LinkedIn groups they keep saying are coming back. And it was like, hey, post your episodes here for promotion. And I'm like, wait a minute. Does this mean if I sign into this group, it's just going to be everybody going, here's episode 27, here's 26, 2018, 210. Because I'm like, there's a really good chance I'm not going to be interested in a big chunk of those because, well, we all have different interests and stuff. And I'm waiting for somebody to get back because I like that just sounds like to me, that's shotgun marketing where yeah, it only takes 2 seconds to post and say here's episode whatever, and we talk about such and such and hope that one person comes and listens to it. And I guess if it only takes 3 seconds to do that, why not? But
yeah, but no, don't do those groups. Like like if you think you're going to do them for promotion, although it would be helpful to have a group where you feel like you're getting constructive feedback on your podcast. You already have a group. They're called your listeners.
Yeah,
ask them. Like, you don't need to get a bunch of strangers. Although that's not totally true, Dave. Oftentimes, people will overlook things, much like my listeners were overlooking the fact that they couldn't hear a sentence in my intro. And they're like, all right, that's just him. He's not going to change it. We just won't say anything, right? And so sometimes you need some strangers to say stuff like that to you. So maybe that's not such a bad idea. If it just becomes a post fest and there's no feedback on the episodes, that's one thing. If you're getting constructive feedback on it, I think that's helpful. If you think you're going to get listeners this way, man, the percentage on this may be lower than the percentage that you get if you put out an email survey. So, I wouldn't lean on it as a way to get new listeners for sure. Hey, Mike, before we go too far, Mike Uyghur sent me this picture here. He is watching us. He is watching Ask the Pod. If you throw that up full screen, he is asking, or he's watching Ask the Podcast Coach this morning from his living room, full screen on his TV. Mike, thanks for watching Ask the Podcast Coach on your TV. What do I have? Is that? I guess that is live. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
I want to know what the little things are on the bottom shelf.
What do you mean? Oh, this is an Xbox. I think that's an Xbox.
I mean, he must have children because he has. I know one of those things.
Oh,
was like
the animals.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
cool.
Those he does. He has 2. So, Mike, thanks.
It's funny how much people pay attention to your background because I had somebody watched on a comment on a YouTube clip. And they said they're just trying to figure out what's in the background. I'm like, okay, this is a box of business cards, and that's my Hall of Fame award. I'm like, I need something to clean this up over here.
He said those are Emmett's animals. So
yeah.
those, yes.
Emily says she moderates the hashtag Pattern Family group. All the posts must be approved. 90% are deleted because it's someone posting their new episode, even though there is a specific thread every week for people to post their episodes. It's gross. And no one wants you to watch your live video in this group. So that's kind of interesting. Again, I think if you give something people can spam, they will spam it. I mean, I've lost two email addresses where somebody will blast out something and they carbon copy everyone. And I'm like, no, you just gave my email to this entire group. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I said, because everybody's selling something on the internet. Look at my Etsy group and buy some, necklaces or what. I'm like, no. And so somebody just did that to me a couple weeks ago. And I was like, hey, just in the future, could you please blind carbon copy people so they don't my email address? So that's always kind of fun. That's actually a huge pet peeve of mine when people do that. I'm like, because I had one, it was like my very first email, and like my family used it, and I would have just opened up, I would just have hundreds of emails. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And it all became because this guy blasted it out to his newsletter, and just everybody just started, who knows how that happened, but all I know is I would just open up my email and a whole bunch of email from people I didn't know. And I was like, you're killing me.
Yeah. You got to be careful on those sending those out. This is where like a MailChimp or an Aweber is so much more helpful when you're sending out some of those, that kind of communication. If you want subscribers and such, that's just stupid. Like whoever did that, like, don't do that. That's dumb. Yeah. Stop doing that.
I'm missing my iPad. I have that clip of the Apple guy going, "Don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't,
don't do
don't."
that.
Yeah. Well, they didn't realize I had a slide in my presentation where I mentioned about review swaps. And I said, kind of like what you said, you have somebody who can give you feedback. They're called your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you're asking complete strangers to review your show, I said, that's, and why isn't your actual audience doing that? And I just explained that to them. I said, one of the reasons I pointed that out. I said, number one, it's kind of a weird way to get reviews. I said, but number two, I said, I see people that look at a new show and they're like, how does this person have 107 reviews already? They've only been doing a podcast for 2 months. And they'll kind of like, I've only got 7. Well, you have 7 actual reviews. They have 107, of which 100 are fake. And I said, so if you see that and you start to feel that, look at the reviews and see how many of them came in on the same day and the review is something like "Love the host, great show." I said, because that's when especially if they're all the same day. I said, that's really weird and just
Mm-hmm.
happen. I said, so, but this one lady came up, she goes, I had no idea there were things like review swaps. I'm like, oh yeah. And so I saw one in a Facebook group and actually tried to explain to people like, why are you doing this? And it just sat there and it was weird. It was organic. It just like somebody's like, anybody interested in a review swap? And it was just like, I am. And here's my show. And I was like, wow. And it just kept going and going and going. And I was like, so it is.
Yeah. What makes your show great? Great content, and you engage your audience. Like, don't engage somebody else's audience to try and give you fake reviews. Like,
Yeah.
get them from your own audience. I mean, earn it. Don't. And we're Dave. Our audience here is pretty like we're talking. They would all agree on it with us on this. So we're kind of preaching to the choir a little bit because they wouldn't probably do this stuff. Hey, I know you had Emily on right before you left for Australia. And I don't know if you got it, but I got the book right here. We had her on Home Gadget Geeks as well, talking about her book, The Story Behind. If you haven't picked that up yet, still great opportunities to get that done, get out there. Speaking of promoting your podcast, holy cow, write a book. Jeez.
Right.
Emily, nice job. So
yes.
Just say congratulations to her on this show. I got a chance to do it on mine. I know you talked a little bit about it when she was on.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to all those shows, by the way. So thanks for those guys who filled in to do that. But congratulations, Emily.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed. I had all my mail on hold. And then when that's interesting when you have like 8 days of mail and I said, just drop it off, when I get back. So if I look out this window, I'm looking right at my mailbox. So when I saw the mail person like pull in, I just walked out. I said, you have a big chunk for me. And I did. And I'm going to say 80% of it, if not 90, was just junk.
Oh,
just, coupons and blah blah blah. And I'm like, where's the book? And I'm like, so I'm guessing it's probably going to show up today because I've not got my copy yet. I may have bought the ebook when I think about it.
Oh,
because I don't actually read books.
I wanted a physical copy so that I could have her sign it the next time I see her. That is the, and it was so funny. The book came in. We talked about this on my show, but the book came in, and Sarah, my wife, looked at it and she goes, "Oh, I want that book as soon as you're done with it." So
nice.
she's super pumped about she loves this kind of stuff, and so be a great book for her. Very well done. But when we think about the way Emily has done this, it was a little bit of an accident. It was her podcast, and then a producer came and said, "Hey, can we put this in book form?" And she's like, "Well, I write this stuff out. I guess why couldn't we?" And so, right place, right time. She didn't manufacture that. She didn't necessarily try and make that happen. That was just something that happened based on what I think is a really good product to start with. The Story Behind podcast is an amazingly well done podcast. And Emily puts a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of creativity. She sings on it, which is dynamite. Love that episode, Emily, by the way. And it was a little weird at first, I'll just be honest, but once I got used to it, I embraced it. She spends a lot of time and effort. We all talk about doing podcasts and then struggling to write the show notes. She writes the show notes first.
Yeah.
And then does the podcast. And so amazingly well done. And I think if we want great product and we want we want more listeners, spend more time on your product.
That's it. I think it was Rob Walsh was talking about that where people are spending 90% of their time promoting their show and 10% creating it. And their audience, they're like, my audience isn't growing and I'm spending all this time on promoting it. And Rob said, swap that 90% on creation and 10% promoting it. And that way, when people find it, they're finding something that they're going to go, oh, wow, I want to read that when you're done. You know what I mean? It's like the,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm guilty of it. I think creativity happens by accident, and so I'm guilty of just waiting for it to happen. When I think in a lot of ways it happens. It's creativity is very intentional, and it happens when we put a lot of hard work and effort into something, and we get these moments of greatness. And so it's you got to put some time in. If you really love doing it, you got to put some time into it. And you got to put a lot of people. I see this in the groups. They've been podcasting for a month or two, or maybe even 6. You're just starting. Like, I think you're just getting good at the 1 year mark, or maybe even the 2 year mark. I go back and listen to my podcast. I was doing a podcast on Thursday, and one of my hosts, who I've been podcasting now with for 4 years, had gone back and listened to an episode we had done 5 years ago. And she said, Jim, you have gotten so much better. Now, that's awesome, and it's terrifying at the same time, because I go back and listen to those first episodes, and I'm like, oh, can we just delete those? Like, how do we get rid of that stuff? Now, audience doesn't know, and they don't care. They don't sense it unless they're regular listeners now and they go back, right? But in the day, it was cool. It was great, right? But you got to do it. You just got to keep doing it. And it's not if you want to be great at this, you need thousands of hours of practice. Not tens, or not even hundreds, but thousands of hours of practice to get good at it.
Yeah. Craig in the chat room says, Picasso said, inspiration only finds me when I'm working.
Yeah.
I love that line.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, to me, you mentioned that people don't know that when they're listening to it. And it used to drive me nuts when I played in bands, if somebody made a mistake and they would make a face.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'd go, oh, and they'd make a scrunchy face and shake their head like, oh, or whatever, or they point at somebody, and I'm like, the audience doesn't know that's a mistake.
No.
The minute you make a face and throw a tantrum, everybody's like, what's wrong with Steve? Why is Steve, it looks like he ate a lemon on stage. I'm like, dude, just smile and laugh. And nobody knows, we know, but they don't. So your audience doesn't know.
No, it's the same way in podcasting, right? When you make a mistake and you call attention to it while you're doing it, they don't know. They don't know oftentimes they don't know what's going sound behind me, or those kinds of things that you draw attention to them, and you're like, guess what? Nobody would have heard them anyways.
Nobody. Well, I did an episode, I forget what it was, and there was something wrong with our audio, and I didn't mention it till the very end. And I said, if you noticed it, let me. And like nobody.
Well, it was a little ticking, wasn't it? It was kind of a ticking, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like nobody said, like, what happened? What are you doing? But you held up Emily's book, and I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you read books on a regular basis?
No.
Really?
No. In fact, I won't even spend a bunch of time reading this one. My wife will read it all. I've listened to most of these.
Well, that's okay. Do you consume books in one format or another?
Not a lot. No.
Okay.
Mostly podcasting. Yeah. Or Audible.
See, that's me.
Yeah.
Well, Audible. Yeah. I count Audible as reading a book,
but it's mostly podcasting. And lately, it's been a lot of YouTube. Like I am spending an enormous amount of time following really interesting, very smart people on YouTube who have things that they're saying that matter. And you're just like, wow, this could be and very, very interesting stuff. So that has been most of my consumption has been YouTube.
Anything, see, now to me, I'm like, oh, that requires a follow-up question. Interesting things that matter, like anything pop out of your head that you go like this guy I just watched was like, wow.
Yeah, I'm watching this couple they're in northern Idaho, or up in the Idaho area, Washington, Western Washington, and they're building a timber frame house, and they're filming everything, and they film every day, and they're about 2 months behind, but they post just about every day. And it's just them and what they're thinking and what they're going through and how they're handling. They're living on this property in a camper, basically, and they've been in a camper for 2 years. This little tiny kind of camper kind of thing. And they're not always right, and it's not always clean, and it's not always happy. but watching them go through their life journey is like experiencing, like, I consider them my friends. They don't know me, and I don't really know them, but it has been for me, it's just been then from a technical standpoint, I've been thinking about doing some vlogging, some more video on what I do. And I'm kind of watching them from, how do they do this? Like, how do they film this? Everybody think that's pretty easy. Just put a camera out and record it. It's not that way. Like, you need to set things up. You need to kind of think about the angles and the way you're recording it and the way you're doing it. And so I'm kind of watching it for two things. One is, how would I do video if I was going to do something like that? Or do I even want to? Man, look at the trolls for these guys they're incredible. Like,
yeah, YouTube is horrendous.
Yikes. Just brutal. And you know what? Not even people trying to be trolls, just people being themselves in the chat. And you kind of like, yikes, you people are, I don't know. Do you have friends? Like, do people like you? It's incredible what you see there. But two, it's just interesting, Dave, to follow them on a daily basis. And every morning I wake up and watch, they make a 20-minute video. That's a recap from the day before. And then real, you think, okay, so timber frame house. I'm watching two different YouTube channels of folks building yachts, wooden yachts from scratch, from the ground up. How do you build a boat? Like, I've never seen a boat. Like, have you ever built a boat?
I have not.
I have not either. And I'm not a boat builder, and I don't even live near the ocean. Like, I live in Omaha, Nebraska, right? But the things they're learning and doing and figuring out, and the relationships, and then the volunteers who come to help them. Like, talk about being interesting and engaging. They're getting people who are taking vacation time, traveling to their location. They don't know each other. They're just, I'm sure they're arranging this in advance, and they're coming to volunteer to help on these projects. That is the ultimate measure for me of engagement. If somebody would fly to Omaha, put themselves up in a hotel, and help me work on a project for a week, I mean, and I don't know them, that's pretty amazing if you have a listener do something like that. So I've been kind of watching it from, how are they gathering? How are they getting engagement? What are they doing? Well, they're being real. They're just being real. It's no fakery. It's no goof-offery. It's just, they're being real, right? They're out there doing their thing, and they're being genuine and authentic. And I think as podcasters, we could learn a lot from that, of being genuine and authentic in the work that we do.
Yeah, that's the one thing, again, most of these people I did know in Australia, but I knew Pat Flynn, and I listened to Jordan Harbinger's show all the time, and they're not a whole lot different off the mic. Like I said, the only thing I thought was somewhat different about Pat Flynn, he's hilarious. He doesn't really joke around that much on his show. It's lighthearted, and it's factual, and it's marketing, but there's not a lot of light jokes there, and he's just hilarious. Both he and Jordan Harbinger were really pretty funny.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a case where, they were on the microphone and then you get them alone and they talk like this.
Yeah. But Dave, you have that appeal, I think, for people, and that people love. I hear these comments about you all the time, is you're exactly the same on your show as you are in person. And you don't try to be, podcast excellence extraordinaire. Oh, I'm above you on your shows. You're like, hey, I'm a guy, and I'm just doing this thing, and I'm here to help you. And I think that's endearing. And I think a lot of folks that follow you like that. They like that. They don't like the fakeness, or they don't like the hypocrisy, or they don't like the, I'm in this for the money. And I actually think, since you started working for Liston, and that the day job is kind of secure, I think you've gotten even better in advice and being true, because you're not worried about it. You're not trying to make a living off this thing. I think you've gotten better.
Yeah, I just learned that from when, in the past, many moons ago, my first marriage, we were trying to have a kid, and it was just insane. Our money situation was just horrendous, because if you've never gone through them, fertility treatments are not cheap. And so anything I could do to make a buck, I was doing it. And I remember I started doing guitar lessons, and it's weird because I love teaching. I do not like, well, I shouldn't say I don't like, but doing guitar lessons, I think a lot of that depends too on the student, as does any kind of teaching. But doing guitar lessons really made it like a job. I went from something I love to do to, but I had to do anything to make a buck. And so I've always wondered that if I did the School of Podcasting full time, so let's say whatever, Google buys Libsyn and shuts it down, I could live on the School of Podcasting, but I think that would be bizarre because then I think I would stress out a bit.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
if
you make
somebody,
different decisions.
yeah, if somebody unsubscribed, I'd be like, no, that's gas money for next week.
Yeah, it makes it a little questionable sometimes, the decisions you're making, because it's like, okay, am I making these in the best interest of my listener, or am I saying them to make money? And so I've noticed since you started working at Libsyn, I think you've actually gotten better with that instead of worse.
Well, I just love it because it just gives me a whole wide spectrum of, that we should probably mention that. Although I think everybody knows this, your podcast name should not have any keywords in it.
Ooh,
Your
yeah.
your author tag should be your first and last name. Like for us, it'll be Dave Jackson, Jim Cullison. Don't put any, shenanigans like that. And that also goes for your author in the episode. That was the one this week that I was like, I don't see any kind of keyword stuffing with this guy. And then you went to the episodes and looked at his author, and it was like his name, and then like his guest name, keyword for the author tag for his guest. And out of the pool he went. And so I don't know why. We've all speculated it might be something to do with smart speakers or whatever, but Apple, we're not kidding when we say Apple is throwing out people on a regular basis, and it happens almost on a daily basis now. I run into somebody, they're like, I'm not in iTunes anymore. I'm like, okay. I'm like, then I'll go over to their website, I'll click on their link to iTunes. It'll say, do you want to open up in iTunes? And I'm like, yep. And it does. And it says, this is not available in this country. And you're like, oops. So I've changed mine. I mean, it used to be School of Podcasting - learn to podcast, blah, 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 blah. And now it's just School of Podcasting. And it is what it is. We're not real crazy about that, but if you want to be in their system, you have to follow their rules. And I kind of almost think if they keep really getting, this critical, that eventually they may need their own feed and settings. Cause like, what if I want to put a keyword in my, what if I'm doing a TV show and I need to put something after it? But that is something that's happening on a real regular basis. And I have not checked, well, I could check it now. I have not checked the Sales Whisperer. There's a show called The Sales Whisperer that is my like benchmark for keyword stuffing, because this is the guy that used to have Zig Ziglar in his title and a bunch of other stuff. Oh, and it just dawned on me. I think right now I'm in the Italy store on the podcast rodeo show, talking about getting feedback and making your show better. I was talking to James Cridlin and I mentioned the podcast rodeo show, and he goes, because I told him, I said, I have my smart speaker. I just ask her to pick a category, because you can actually program, if you haven't played with blueprints in Amazon with your smart speaker, they're great fun. And so now I can just have her pick a category, and he goes, ooh, do you have her pick a country? And I'm like, ooh, so I'm now reviewing shows from English speaking countries, which is fun. But let me see if I type in Sales Whisperer. That's a fun word to type.
Emily says they seem to be gone.
Yeah, I don't see him, because I know I used to type in Zig Ziglar, and that would bring him up almost always.
I guess I got lucky. I never followed this advice for Home Gadget Geeks. So the title is Home Gadget Geeks. It is pulling, because I have video, 2 video feeds. I do have in parentheses audio MP3, and then that's the title. And then it just says by Jim Collison. And I never got into the keyword stuffing groups that tried to do that. I know that was a real popular. Who kind of popularized that? Was there someone that was teaching that as a podcast guru?
Well, yeah, there are a few, but Laura Patterson, and you want to talk about an awkward thing. And she was so cool about it, because I asked somebody, I want to get her. I know she does the Copy That Pops show. I think her last name is Patterson. Really, really cool. Yeah, Laura Peterson. Sorry. Pettersen. Really cool person, and she straight up told people to put keywords in their name, and I'm like, oh, so I talked to somebody like at lunch. I'm like, what do I do here? And he was like, he goes, aren't you on a panel? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I'll just ask the question. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it in front of people. And then he did anyway. And so I just said, look, this is just in. I said, this is like breaking news. And so she was really, because I'm like, I don't want to be that guy that corrects another. I'm like, but she was like, no, I'm glad you said that. Because she was saying put keywords. And I'm like, that will undoubtedly get you kicked out.
It will now. Didn't always.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't keyword stuff, but I have had my name legally changed to Zig Ziglar. So that's
nice. And Kyle Bondo says Apple Podcast / iTunes told us our network page that we could put the host name / network name. So I have my podcast as Kyle Bondo / GagglePod. It's just fun to say GagglePod.
It's a great word. It's a good word.
And iTunes will search on both. Apple allowed this as an option, but you have to have a podcast network page on the good old Apple iTunes. So don't do that if you don't actually have a network page, that's one of those things that's on my list always. I'm like, I need to go get one of them, their fancy pages. And I'm like, because I'll get more listeners if my background is blue or pink or green.
Well, you might. I hate to poo-poo it too much, but
right.
You might. I actually, like I said, I think you get solid listeners when you get word of mouth or in people like you. That's what does it. Like when they like you, they'll stay around. I cannot tell you, and I know we need to wrap it up here, but I cannot tell you, I've gotten emails over the last couple weeks from people who say, hey, I've been listening to you since your time on the Home Server Show. And that was years ago. And I'm or I've been listening to you since you started on the Home Server Show. That was 8 years ago. And you go, oh, wow. First of all, I'm sorry. And then, or in Canada, sorry. But it is one of those things like you think, wow, this is someone who's followed me along all these weeks, all these years. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know about you, but that's what I'm looking for. I really want those friends who are listening, not necessarily just blasting it out and hoping if it ever got big, then so be it. I've told you before, I don't wish that upon anybody. Fame is not what everyone thinks it is.
No.
It is.
When people go fame or fortune, I'm like, I'll take the fortune, but the fame part,
I don't even know if I want the fortune some days. It just comes out with all its own problems as well.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful what you wish for. So I know we got to wrap it.
Yeah. Eileen says he did. Wes Schaefer. I don't know what it was called. I guess the website's still the same, but it's now the Sales Podcast. What was the Sales Whisperer? And it is keyword free. And when you look for that, so it's great to be back. Chat room, we missed you. Jim, I missed you. It's nice to have you back. Are you around?
No, I have I'm off for the next 2 weeks as we wrap it, and then I'll be back permanent for the winter.
Well, it's good because we had some people go, hey, can I sit in Jim's chair?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'd love to have them. Thank you for all of those. Again, thanks to Chris and John and Emily for filling in for me. I listened to every single word you guys said after you said it, so thanks for jumping in there. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And what's coming up on your show?
Oh, speaking of Surrey, we had Erin Lawrence. She's a Canadian blogger and podcaster who came on. She does gadget reviews, and she's awesome. So we talked about she's converting a camper into a tech, like a tech camper. It's going to be it'll be a conversion van that's just loaded with tech. So if you like that kind of stuff, head over to theaverageguy.tv, and it's posted right now.
Nice. On the School of Podcasting this week, we have the question, do audiograms actually lead people to find new podcasts? That was the question of the month. If you haven't answered it yet, get it in like right now, and I will put it in because I'm assembling that tomorrow. But that will be that. And then I'll be sharing the actual, you know what? We just ran out of music. I never turned it up. All right. I'm not going to talk about
Do it again.
I will put it in later. No, because it's like 2 minutes of stuff because I'm using a different thing. Yeah. Right. I'm using my phone screen is blank. And I just pulled it up and I saw it go 654. I'm like, oh, well, I'm out of music.
How the sausage is made. No
exactly. So, but on the School of Podcasting, we'll have that. And then to me, the big lesson from Australia was I now understand the true meaning of know, like, and trust, and especially the trust thing, because I did so many things that I normally would not do. Like, not even close, not doing it. But I did because I trusted the people that were throwing the event. So that'll be on this week's episode of the School of Podcasting. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're here every Saturday morning at 10:30 Eastern. Simply go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live, and we will see you again real soon with a new episode.